Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. Pressure on the U.S. Federal Reserve expands to include Fed Governor Lisa Cook and accusations of mortgage fraud.
They're looking for obviously a reason.
If a cop follows you for 500 miles, you're going to get a ticket. You know who said that? Warren Buffett.
Our economics reporter Steve Liesman weighs in.
Lisa Cook is a very accomplished economist. Lisa Cook should not be known for this thing.
Speaking of the economics, Steve Liesman is at the Jackson Hole Symposium with the world's central bankers, including Kansas City Fed President Jeffrey Schmid. Is an interest rate cut on the way?
The inflation number is probably closer to 3 than it is 2, and I think we've got some work to do.
And how close is too close? President Trump's march toward more involvement in corporate America. Author Walter Isaacson says it is a risky road.
That type of state capitalism, it often evolves into crony capitalism, where you have favored companies and industries, those that pay tribute.
It's Thursday, August 21st. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Talk of Jackson Hole, talk of the Globe, talk of the...
Weaponizing the housing regulator. I was doing some research on that great Soviet era quote. Actually, a lot of people have used the same quote. If you can show me a man, I'll find your crime. It was a Soviet jurist named Vyshinsky. Anatoly Vyshinsky came up with it, but also attributed to Stalin. It's a bad way to run. It's lawfare, and it's probably a bad way to run a. And I'm not saying that Trump doesn't have reason, because I think he thinks that the same thing was done to him
Letitia
during
James,
his.
He thinks was,
and Adam Schiff.
But it's not used.
It's Adam Schiff, Letitia James, this person. This was 4 years ago. I did see a MAGA tweet that says, "So the Fed won't lower rates, but they'll get better rates for themselves." That's the MAGA take on it. But this is right in your wheelhouse. I knew it yesterday.
Tell everybody about what we're talking about.
Well, supposedly 4 years ago, before she was a Fed governor, she claimed principal residence of some house she was going to rent or something, got a lower mortgage rate. But this Pulte, the FHFA guy, I guess you could say that this is part of his purview, but this is the third. I think it was Adam Schiff, too, and Letitia. It's all coming from here, and then the president himself tweeted or whatever it's called on social media that she's got to resign. But it certainly looks like
news for anybody who it's
Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook says I don't know if this. She says she has no intention of being bullied to step down from her position following claims by a Trump administration official that she committed mortgage fraud. In a statement, Cook said she intends to take any questions about my financial history seriously as a member of the Federal Reserve, so I'm gathering the accurate information to answer any legitimate questions and provide the facts. Nominated to her position by Joe Biden in 2022, the fight kicked off when the head of the FHFA, Bill Pulte, sent a letter to Justice Department officials asking the DOJ to criminally investigate Cook. He alleges Cook claimed 2 different properties, as we just said, as her primary residence at the same time. Yeah. President Trump,
2 weeks apart, took out those mortgages, right?
President Trump posted on Truth Social yesterday that Cook must resign now, but go back to the Fed building being remodeled. They're looking for.
They're looking for
obviously
excuses,
a reason to.
There's nothing look, if she did this is a problem. You lie on federal documents. It is for a mortgage application. It is a crime. The question comes in with how you're getting this information, how you're using it. I went and looked at the letter that Bill Pulte sent to Pam Bondi. He said, in the course of exercising U.S. federal housing authorities under the Federal Housing Enterprises Financial Safety and Soundness Act of 1992, U.S. federal housing has identified matters that are appropriate for referral to the U.S. Department of Justice for consideration of criminal prosecution. Yeah. I guess the question is, were they looking through the list of people that they're trying to get booted out of jobs for cause and using this information that's collected at the
I can't imagine that they were just happened upon these applications,
Well, you don't want to see the IRS
4 years later.
way.
That's why I started with Wyszynski. And there's another old Russian expression that show me a neck and I'll show you a collar. Mm-hmm. So,
but at the same
I'll
time,
give you a CNBC
at the same
version.
time, I don't think you.
What's the CNBC?
CNBC version, if a cop follows you for 500 miles, you're going to get a ticket.
Right.
You know who said that?
Jim Carrey?
Warren Buffett.
Oh, Warren Buffett. Remember the Jim Carrey movie?
Yeah.
Where
How long have you been
the
following
cop
me?
pulls him over. Do you know why I pulled you over? Depends on how long you've been following me. Yeah.
But the
I don't like. I think the IRS can do this. That's why a weaponized IRS is really scary too.
Right. The thing is you don't want to see these agencies politicized to this extent where they are going after enemies. I also don't want to sound like I'm saying this is no big deal if she actually did this. If you lie on this stuff, it is a federal crime.
Did she get both mortgages, or did she just
got
apply for both mortgages?
No, she got both mortgages for 2 houses 2 weeks apart, one in Michigan, one in Georgia. Claimed on both of them that they would be her primary residence.
So
and we've all gotten mortgages,
I mean,
that's
so I want to know a lot more about that.
This is three's a charm, though. I mean, Letitia James, Adam Schiff.
And Bill Pulte was very actively kind of pushing
He's a hard ass.
agenda.
And, I like him, and I think there's certain, just like everything else, I like certain things, but then there are certain times when it's like, whoa.
You can't use things that way, right?
Right. When I saw this, yesterday, and we thought we were going to talk about it, but I was, there's something for everyone. I mean, I can go back and say, look, you harass. How many trials were there against Trump? How many lawfare trials were there against Trump?
The reason I brought up the Letitia
he feels
James
totally
one.
justified. He's like, this is what they did to me. I'm going back and getting them.
The reason I was going back to Letitia James is it's very similar to what they accused Trump and the Trump Organization of on a grand scale, of lying about how valuable his businesses were when he was going out for loans with some of these things
totally
too. But the difference was,
crime.
and that was politicizing that office. But she had to go and get the information from other places. It wasn't taking the information that you had and using it. But you're right, it was politicization
Alvin Bragg,
of the
Alvin Bragg
office.
twisted himself into a pretzel to get around the statutes of limitation to juice something up into a felony that wasn't a felony, to get the 32 felony accounts against
Two
Trump.
wrongs don't make a right.
Nobody should be. No, I know that. I know that. Two wrongs don't
I think
make a
it's
right.
the distinction which Becky's making, which is, and by the way, I totally now accept, and you and I
lawfare. We have
we've had conversations about what Letitia James was doing and about that case and all
Alvin
these
Bragg.
things, and all of those folks. But the idea that when you have people inside the departments that are actively doing this, that's different, I think, than even prosecutors, arguably even weaponizing their own business.
Prosecutors are politicians too. I mean, anytime you're using the arm of the law for a political reason, it's not a great thing. But I immediately took it to the IRS, and you do not want to see the IRS weaponized in a way like the NHTSA.
No, I don't even like talking about the IRS on TV. I haven't done anything, but they can, like I said, they can ask you for every receipt.
I got a bill for $19 yesterday from the state of New Jersey. Like, I thought I'd done everything right, but I've got $19 that I owe, and it's racking up
with interest.
Right.
We're talking about industrial policy all day long today too. I was also looking through that. Public-private partnerships sound great, don't they? There's a lot of historical precedent for that. Do you know where you can find the most historical precedent? A lot of Latin America, or China, or Spain. Yeah. The only one we really have here that kind of worked was Fannie and Freddie. Most of the time.
But it didn't really work.
Right.
It worked because we took them over.
Right.
I mean, fully took them over.
Fully took them over.
And it will probably, by the way,
it froze out all the investors.
It'll work even less, though, if the investors can get their money back. So think about that. Think about when Trump decides to actually, decide that he's going to spin Fannie and Freddie off and turn it private again, which is what a whole folks like John Paulson and Bill Ackman and others want to happen.
And Bill Pulte.
And Bill Pulte. Right. And who will be the beneficiary of that? And the largest of the taxpayer. So this is where it gets super complicated. Right. And it goes to the Sarah Fryer question, which is, sure, OpenAI may not be taking money from the government right now, but at some point, the government may say to OpenAI, fork over the money.
Well, because you've been the beneficiary of what we've spent.
You've been the beneficiary of all of the money that we're
spent.
Subsidizing the infrastructure. That's why this all, talk about the slippery slope. The slippery slope is real.
Well, I'm even more worried about the ability of the government to pick the right companies to do things. And then to prop them up when they shouldn't be propped up. And then it's not capitalism. You're not able to fail. It's another too big to fail. Intel might not be the right company to be backing here.
Well, the question is, which is the right company? Because
Well, that's why the market sorts things out. The free market sorts that out.
Yeah, but the problem is we don't. Well, the problem with the free market in this context is we don't have, forget about a national champion, we don't have somebody currently that's both either capable, interested, or economically incented to do it, because the economics of it, at least historically, maybe with the tariffs it changes.
This is what I was going to say. Maybe the tariffs work in this situation where you economically incentivize people to do it back here. It's the stick, but it's the stick. But it look, you're not going to get a free ride if you're not building things here in the United States.
We're going to settle this by 9, all these things. We're going to settle the lawfare and the industrial policy. We'll have it all.
Let me throw one more onto it, and that is what Wesley Clark talked to us about this week, the former NATO commander and general. He said basically any agreement that you get from peacetime, any agreement you cut with Putin or anybody else, is only going to be as good as the commander-in-chief standing behind it.
Right.
We started the Cold War with strategic nuclear superiority, and President Trump is exactly right to be concerned now about our strategic defense in the United States. Because in a multipolar world, mutual assured destruction does not provide the level of deterrence for the United States that we thought it did during the Cold War.
You choose what to enforce and what not to enforce. It kind of goes back into all of these. You can set up laws and rules and regulations, but bad guys can get around good laws. Right. And the best you're going to have to do is you can't make it goes back to what Charlie Munger once told me. You can't make a good deal with a bad person, no matter how much legalese you put into it.
Right. Well, hearkening back to the worst things about the Soviet era we saw from Lavrov also yesterday. And nothing short of really tough sanctions are going to get them to do. That was unbelievable, the way the developments yesterday and the things that they're saying at this point. This backing out. We're back to 2022, and they're lying about Ukraine accepting the terms of that deal back then, because they didn't accept it. And the biggest number of drone attacks that they've done came yesterday.
It's like you can't make a good deal with a bad person. That's what it comes all down to.
It's a $300 million mega-yacht that once belonged to a Russian oligarch going up for auction, but potential buyers may be more than they bargained for here. On the high seas. It may cost him, is really the issue, I think. Robert Frank is going to join us right now, the only one who knows all about the yachts. Tell us. Tell us.
Good morning, Andrew. Well, the U.S. government is, in fact, auctioning off that $300 million yacht that it seized as part of its crackdown on Russian oligarchs. The yacht is called Amadea, and it was seized by the Justice Department off the coast of Fiji shortly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. And it was all part of that global capture of dozens of yachts, villas, art, and private jets that were taken by governments to pressure President Putin and his money machine at the time. But now, most of these assets are sitting in legal limbo and costing taxpayers millions of dollars. The U.S. government says Amadea is owned by Suleiman Kerimov. He is, of course, the sanctioned Russian billionaire. The holding company for the yacht, however, says it's owned by another non-sanctioned Russian, so therefore the seizure was illegal. Now, the government has spent over $30 million of taxpayer money to maintain this yacht and its crew. It's now docked in San Diego. A judge approved a sale finally in March. It's now being sold at auction that ends on September 10th. Bidders, if you're interested, have to put up a $10 million deposit. Yacht brokers tell me that potential buyers are leery of buying a yacht that could be subject to a legal claim by a wealthy Russian. But for those with deep pockets, good lawyers, maybe guns, and lawyers, and money, right. Amadea is 348 feet long, sleeps 16 guests and 36 crew. It's got a glass elevator serving 6 decks, a chromotherapy pool, I don't even know what that is, 36-foot infinity pool, a nightclub, marble fireplaces, helipad, and a winter patio dining room inspired by an alpine conservatory. It also has a ton of gold inside, so much gold that
like
gold furniture, gold furniture,
gold lining.
So much gold that I thought maybe, somebody could gift this to the president. We could get a presidential yacht back.
Who put that much gold into a yacht? Don't they know that gold is heavy and sinks? Are you stupid?
The Russians particularly put not just gold, but a lot of masterpiece paintings on their yacht. And so part of the issue is climate control. What reason it's so expensive for these yachts to maintain? $600,000 a month it's cost U.S. taxpayers to maintain this yacht. So
Are they taking the art off the yachts?
No,
They're leaving the art.
They're leaving the art
on the yachts.
On the yachts.
Why do they do that? Why wouldn't you just take
Sound
it?
like
Well, because then
a banker and like split them up here.
yeah, I think it gets complicated in terms of confiscating property and where it is. So you're keeping it all together, and
I'm just thinking I could save money on the air conditioning.
Yeah.
If I move the
Get rid of the.
if I move
But
the art.
it's docking fees, insurance. I mean, these boats are incredibly expensive.
This sounds like a flipping opportunity because I don't know if I'd want to keep one of these things and then have somebody really mad at me.
And that's probably the only thing you're going to be. They'll probably buy it, they charter it, keep it close to the U.S., and then eventually sell it at some point when there's a resolution around the ownership.
Right.
But it's going to sell for a lot less than $300 million. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Robert, thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Nice to see you.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, Walter Isaacson issues a warning about the slippery slope from state capitalism to crony capitalism.
To have the government decide it's going to take a stake in Intel and not take a stake in NVIDIA, but tell NVIDIA to give it 15% or whatever, that's just sort of a scattershot method of crony capitalism that's not necessarily going to bring chip manufacturing back to America, which is the goal.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Here's Joe Kernen.
Bill Pulte, Director Pulte is watching, and he agrees. Becky nailed it on at least one thing that she said, and that is that it is a serious allegation. I guess here's Becky Quick is right. This came out at 6:11 after our discussion. Lying on mortgage applications is a major federal crime with up to 30 years. Much more will come out about all these loans. I can also say that the agency says that they were tipped about.
Well, and that's an important point
this.
because if in fact somebody either they were tipped from outside the agency, or even if they were tipped by somebody who be an employee apolitically, down lower, I think a lot of people would feel better about that than if in fact it felt like somebody at the top. If Bill and we got to talk to him, and I know we'd love to get him on the broadcast.
Well, we want him to be able to respond to whether. I mean, we talked all about. Not only did you say that, but you also said a lot of other things about weaponizing.
You don't want to weaponize agencies. We don't know what happened here.
Right.
But
then,
if you think of that from the perspective of the IRS.
Right. And you also hear,
prospect.
How do we get Al Capone? So none of these things are minor, and you do what you, I guess. But that's the thing. I mean, are they after people on the Fed now?
Right. I mean, does it come from tips or does it come from here's a list of people we'd like to look at?
And then there's a slightly different question, but I don't know how you feel about this one. If you knew, for example, that Bill was, against this Fed and wanted to oust, because he's been out there about his own views.
Right.
Well, he's a housing guy. He'd like to see lower rates.
Of
too.
course. But I'm just saying, if that's the case, and then you have either employees or others who say, oh, I'm going to have a favorable ear to this, meaning I'm going to tip this person because I know that they'll actually do something with it, which may be fine. I don't know. We're in a very weird gray zone.
Well,
but it's terrible to be lying on these things. So let's just stipulate straight up.
Will anyone ever do this again? Probably not.
So maybe, by the way, maybe that's a good outcome. Deterrence. We need deterrence.
Exactly. Well, we hope we hear.
I'm saying I have multiple mortgages, and I would never say that it was not my primary.
So you're on the record that you haven't done this? Because I've gotten a tip.
I have not.
I've gotten a tip about
No, I would never. And by the way, it is a big difference. I have like a 3% mortgage on one, or just under 3%, and I pay close to 6% on another because it's not your primary residence.
Honesty is the best policy, someone once said. In addition to show me a man and I'll show you a crime. But call in. Call me. Remember that one? Director Pulte would love to hear from you. And we're waiting. We're leaving the line open. Joining us now to talk about the proposed U.S. government stake in Intel and the future of industrial policy, if that's what this is, CNBC contributor Walter Isaacson. He's a professor at Tulane University and a Perella Weinberg advisory partner. Historically, Walter, and welcome. If you look up public-private partnerships, there's a long history of things like that, most of which it's either Latin America, China, or somewhere else where it's been done, and usually not very successfully. There are some emergency situations. Another PPP with the payroll protection and things like that. We have done things under emergency circumstances. But this is not, or is it?
No, this is really kind of odd when you see everybody from the Fortune magazine piece that Jeffrey Sonnenfeld and the former CEOs of Xerox and Procter & Gamble wrote, or the Wall Street Journal editorial board. You're seeing what is really state capitalism here, where the government is interfering in all sorts of ways in corporate decisions, whether it be pricing, whether it be Coca-Cola, whether it be Intel, and maybe taking a stake in it. And that type of state capitalism, it often evolves into crony capitalism, where you have favored companies and industries, those that pay tribute to the leader. And that is a recipe for not only disaster, but just sort of a corrupt sense of messiness.
Well, I'll tell you, not in defense necessarily of it, but I'll tell you my take. The actual way that those chip grants were doled out in terms of industrial policy in the last administration, with child care and DEI and ESG and Davis-Bacon union wages, and not even getting a stake in the company. That starts it. I would almost say this is improving upon something that was even worse and less bad than the deal we had with as a government with Intel in the first place. Still not great, but actually preferable to what we were doing. Or maybe not.
When you talk about all the things they requested in, what do you call the DEI, whatever, this is the problem with state capitalism. This is the problem with too much government intervention. And you can argue that was worse than what Trump is trying to do with taking a stake in it. But no, this is just going further and further down the path. And if you believe what you just said about all the government intervention, then you got to feel that way now.
I do. I'm even more disturbed that the government go back and look at what we back. How many charging stations did we build? How'd Solyndra work out? We're not good at this. And no matter how smart you think you are, and usually, I don't know, Democrats think they're a lot smarter. There's 100 of them that could run the entire country, and we'd be, oh my God, it'd be the greatest thing that ever happened. And we know what happened. We saw that presidency, and it didn't happen, Walter. So what gets me, I don't want to pick Intel. I don't want to own Intel. I'd rather let somebody else, the free market, decide who's going to win there. Huh?
You want to buy NVIDIA?
For now.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean. It's the
Walter,
question.
here's the question, though. If we don't go down this road, and I'm not suggesting we should.
How do you do it?
If you remember, as you know so well, we did not make chips in this country for a reason, because the economics of making these chips didn't make sense. In fact, I don't think if you had gone to these companies a couple of years ago and said, we're going to give you money and you're going to give us equity, they would have said yes. I think they would have said no, because it didn't make economic sense. That's why they weren't in the business to begin with. Now, maybe you could argue the field has changed insofar as the tariffs change things, and that may make the economics to do this here more attractive, if you will. That's obviously a shift. But if we don't somehow shift the balance, how do you actually, in a free market world, make this happen?
Well, as you know, and I talked to Joe about it a week ago on this show, I really believe we got to bring manufacturing back, and especially if we want to have stand up to China in certain instances, we got to bring chip manufacturing back. Just a question of the way to do it. I think that to some extent using tariffs on especially things that are defense related or national security related is important. But to have the government decide it's going to take a stake in Intel and not take a stake in NVIDIA, but tell NVIDIA to give it 15% or whatever, that's just sort of a scattershot method of crony capitalism that's not necessarily going to bring chip manufacturing back to America, which is the goal. We got to keep our eye on the fact that the main thing is the main thing here, which is bringing manufacturing back to America.
Yeah, and from the defense perspective, the national security perspective, you can think of it with this, you can think of it with pharmaceuticals. I mean, we all got caught during the pandemic by not realizing how much of the supply chain was out of our control and how many things we didn't make here. You can see it even more recently with the rare earth minerals. China kind of is holding us up over that too. I guess, how do you go about it? Is there a room for private-public partnerships or public-private partnerships on some of these things? You think of that, you think of the energy needs we have with AI. Is there room for working relationships between the government and private companies when we have so many big, important national issues that need to be addressed?
I've got a dubious of public-private partnerships, as we said earlier in this segment, and I do think there are many ways to address things. I've always been generally in favor of free trade, but as I said last week, I think I've now come to believe that a 5-10% tariffs on certain industries and frankly across the board, you put your thumb on the scale so that we do more in America.
How do you fix the energy problem?
Yeah, did you complain? I don't remember you complaining about any of the industrial policy, and I'm not doing whataboutism. I'm doing hypocrisy. I don't remember any complaining about the CHIPS Act or the energy transition and trying to grease the skids during the Biden administration.
I never believed in all these Solyndra loans.
Well, you should have come on and said that. Maybe we didn't ask
maybe
you.
we didn't invite him.
I never would have. I would have said that you can have, if you want, subsidies to solar, if you believe that's a long-range goal of this country. And across the board type of thing where you subsidize consumers who want to put in solar. That's fine. That's not crony capitalism.
I don't love any of that because that's making decisions. But Walter, what about this bigger issue?
That's picking the big macro winner.
I don't believe you should pick winners and losers.
Okay, but what about the idea of a public-private partnership when it comes to something like fixing the energy needs for this country? Because I don't know that it's going to get done otherwise.
Well, I think on big things like the grid in America, you've always had utilities that have to be both regulated and public-private partnership. You need infrastructure to do it. But as Joe said earlier, when you start getting into actually executing on infrastructure, like trying to build electric vehicle chargers across America, that's not the government's specialty.
Yeah, or windmill. We thought it was noble and the right thing to do because we're all going to fry in the heat if we don't build windmills on the coast of every, I don't know.
But Joe, you wouldn't have been in favor of the government. I mean, you would have been appalled if the Obama administration, Biden administration, or George Bush administration started taking, in equity stakes in windmill makers. I mean, that would be...
I know. It's sad because we can find instances. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's a equal opportunity screw up from both sides.
And you've seen it. I mean, but it gets into something worse, I think, historically, which is it's not only public-private partnerships. You're getting into state capitalism when you're trying to tell Coca-Cola how to do its formula. You're trying to tell Intel you want a stake. And then that gets into crony capitalism, which is what you kind of have here. You have a cult of personality where people like Tim Cook have to pay tribute to the cult and bring gold. I mean, it's just
gold plate.
Amazing.
It wasn't solid.
And Paramount has to say, oh, you're using state power to hold up my deal, therefore I'll pay your library.
But can I say, this was a similar thing even in the Biden administration where Elon Musk was not invited to go in, and as a result, he was getting cut out. His company was getting cut out.
My feeling about that one. It wasn't a great idea either.
Hey, Walter. Mayor Mamdani is going to fix all this. That's the Democrats' answer, and we're going to get all this squared away once we get him.
When Mayor Mamdani, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren are agreeing with what Trump is doing, then you got to do a double take here.
All right, see you later.
He's in New Orleans. He's okay.
Still to come on Squawk Pod from the mountains, as the Federal Reserve's Jackson Hole Summit kicks off, our Steve Liesman is there, with the headline you can't imagine is far from the minds of the Fed heads. Mortgage fraud accusations against Fed Governor Lisa Cook.
Lisa Cook still has a say in this, and she'll have a chance to defend herself.
And Steve's got comments from Kansas City Fed President Jeff Schmid on the independence of the central bank system in the time of Donald Trump.
Great steel is tested by fire. So let's have the conversation.
This is Squawk Pod.
Up and Becky, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. The Kansas City Fed Economic Policy Symposium starts today in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and that is where we find our senior economics reporter, Steve Liesman. He has a special interview for us. Steve?
Good morning, Becky. As is tradition, we sat down with the host of the symposium, the Kansas City Fed president, and I started by asking Jeff Schmid, now in his second year as president, for his comments about allegations of mortgage fraud against Fed Governor Lisa Cook.
We have responsibilities as professionals inside the Federal Reserve. I'm sure she'll handle matters as she needs to handle them.
Is that a serious thing to do, to write primary residence on two different mortgages?
Let me say this. It's definitely part of the application.
Yeah.
But I also would say if you think about how huge that application is, maybe we could start thinking about how do we make it less paperwork intensive as we go forward.
Do you worry at all that there's a lot of political pressure on the Federal Reserve right now to cut interest rates?
I think the conversation about independence of the Fed and how we interact with all three branches of government is always an important one. And I think, frankly, great steel is tested by fire. So let's have the conversation. It's more important, actually, that the American public has an understanding what the Fed is and what it does, and that they have a value proposition about what we do.
You gave a recent speech where you said you thought the labor market looked pretty solid. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it is solid. I think relative to where we believe full employment is, the numbers look pretty good. And I think that there was definitely some cooling in the first couple quarters. Since then, literally within the last few days, we've met with folks around the district, and there's a lot more optimism going in the last couple quarters of the year. And so I kind of agreed with Chair Powell at his last FOMC conference that while the numbers seem softer, they seem to be in balance, kind of the supply-demand.
Are you seeing in the data at all any impact of changes to the immigration policies?
You probably have to assume that some of the labor data was affected by some of those numbers. I mean, even the administration talks about the successes they've had relative to the numbers and the decline of the numbers from a year ago. So you would think that would be in the mix somewhere, but overall, with the supply and demand imbalance, we still came out with a 4.2 unemployment print.
So let's talk about the other side of the mandate, the inflation side. What are you seeing in the recent numbers?
It seems like that last mile is pretty hard, and I'm one of a lot of folks that believe that there is a real hard, true cost to that last percent of inflation that's in the system. I think that we might see a tick up. I would say that it's probably the inflation number is probably closer to 3 than it is 2, and I think we've got some work to do. I think we want to continue to figure out how we keep pushing that number down toward 2.
Markets have baked in the idea that the Fed is cutting rates in September. Are they in a bad place now as far as you're concerned?
I think we've got a lot of data to harvest between now and September, and I think something will emerge where I think we'll start to see a little bit more definitive move one way or the other. Markets seem to be in good shape, spreads. So I think we're in a really good spot, and I think we really have to have very definitive data to be moving that policy rate right now.
So at this point, are you a person who could go either way in September?
We'll get around tables and we'll collaborate and we'll figure it out. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be said between now and September.
I'll just be honest, reading your last speech, you did not sound like a person who was in a hurry to cut interest rates.
No, that's probably fair.
You look around the economy and you don't see a whole lot of things that are restrictive out there.
Right.
What would tell you that there's restrictiveness going on, or that the Fed is overly restrictive relative to where it should be?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to find it. I mean, I really have been looking. I don't know exactly what we're restricting. Here again, the credibility of our anchoring on that inflation number to 2 is a very important piece of the dual mandate. I think we got to be careful about what lowering short-term rates would do to the inflation mentality if, in fact, inflation is still running closer to 3 than 2.
We have a big day tomorrow. We'll have full coverage of Chair Powell's speech, and then we'll talk with Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack. On the Cook issue, we have asked the Fed for a comment from the Fed chair, and if the issue's been referred to the Inspector General. I also asked FHFA how they discovered the 2 mortgages that Cook has and whether other Fed officials are being investigated. Neither the Fed nor the FHA have responded at this time. Becky?
Yeah, Steve, we had a big conversation about that this morning. Look, you don't want to see weaponization of the FHA or the IRS or any other government agency. But it's also illegal to claim multiple properties as your primary residence. So I guess we have not seen the end of this. I'd be interested to hear if there are other officials who are also being looked into. I think yesterday,
in addition to Adam Schiff and Letitia James.
Letitia James. I think yesterday, Bill Pulte said on Squawk on the Street that they had gotten it from a
Money Matters. Money movers. Media Matters.
Stop! You're confusing.
Money movers.
Money movers. Thank you. I think he said yesterday that it had come in as a tip.
We refer people every day criminally for mortgage fraud, and no one is above the law. And in this case, it happens to be a Fed governor. And I have an obligation to do something about it. So when we received a tip, this is what we discovered. And it's very unfortunate because, a Fed governor is supposed to understand economic harm of mortgage fraud. The Fed has written all about the economic harm of mortgage fraud, in particular occupancy fraud. And here she is allegedly committing mortgage fraud. So I think it's a big issue. I don't think it's going away. I think she will have to resign, or I think she will be fired.
But again, it's complex, a lot of different issues there, and I'm going to assume it's a much bigger topic of conversation behind the scenes at the Fed meeting there.
I heard the conversation at 6 o'clock, and I associate myself right with the center of what you guys were talking about. On the one hand, you shouldn't do this. On the other hand, it seems pretty clearly that Cook was probably singled out. What's interesting to me when I was thinking about this, Becky, is Cook is not your most Fed person in the spotlight. It seems to me you go down a list and get to Cook. You don't start with Cook. And so there is a question as to whether or not other Fed officials have been investigated, whether the very concept puts a chill over the Fed on the other hand. And as she said in her statement, she did this before she was a Fed governor.
I don't think it matters if you do it before or after.
Excuses it.
That was a weird.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I've reported these things over time with Rosengren and with Kaplan and other officials who got involved in not following the law exactly, and they've lost their jobs. And these are very difficult times for at a time when the Fed is very, very focused on making the right policy with all the pressure from the president and these things going on. It makes it a very interesting moment right now for the Fed, and whether or not this pressure has an impact on policy is probably the thing that investors have to think the most about right now. That can Powell at this point come forward and say no rate cuts in September and hold the line on that issue? Or is there just all of this pressure on him and the rest of the Fed to cut rates and give the president what he wants?
I was thinking about you earlier, Steve, as a former Moscow resident, when I was trying to figure out which Soviet-era person actually said, "Show me a man and I'll find you a crime." And it's attributed to a couple, to a judge named Vyshinsky, I like this one, to the head of the Soviet secret police. That's the guy you didn't want to mess with, Lavrentiy Beria. But some people even said Stalin said it, but there's no evidence of that. But that's a bad way to run. That's a bad way to run things. If you can, and it's not true for every person, but you can. Right. If you look deep enough, you might find something. The other expression is "show me a neck and I'll show you a collar."
Right, so this is not yet Soviet Russia, Joe.
According to Sonnenfeld and others, it is.
Well, Lisa Cook still has a say in this, and she'll have a chance to defend herself. And I think before before we jump to judgment, there are these issues out there that do need to be addressed. She'll have to address them in one way or another. But before we jump to judgment, the evidence does look difficult to understand. There are, however, as I understand it, if you look on the HUD website, there are reasons why you can claim two primary residences. I don't know that she qualified for any of those. There's 5 different reasons, and I don't know if any of them. Things about I'll call it up. I didn't study it, but there are 5 reasons on the HUD website as to why you can actually claim that dual primary residences. But that said, the mortgage people I've talked to said you basically cannot do it unless there are these exceptions out there, and they seemed kind of rare. I don't know that any of those existed, but the main thing is, in response to Joe, she gets her say. We have a process here, a judicial process, and we'll follow that and figure it out from there.
No, why is that in reference? I was arguing your side of it, that you can find something on anyone if you're out to get them. That's what the Soviet expression means.
Right.
See?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Joe. I'm agreeing with you.
No.
Can you not take yes for an answer?
That didn't sound like a yes. That sounded like that I'm assuming she's guilty and she's going to have her day in court. That's not.
Does it matter who filled out the form?
And do you have to be like a split personality to live two places? Maybe you got to be.
What if you're married and one partner lives in one place and one lives in the other?
That was one of the things in there, Betsy, was about marriage and there's divorce. And guys, I'll tell you what I hate about this. Can I just tell you real quickly what I hate about this? Lisa Cook is a very accomplished economist, top in her field in some of the things she studied. And I have seen this happen in the media over many years now, which is a person who has done very awesome things in their life becomes known for this thing.
Well, this is
Lisa
why it's
Cook
so dangerous to go into the government or politics or any of these things.
Yeah.
This is why so many people don't want to either take a federal job or go into government, because you do get boiled down to whatever headline comes out or whatever you get pinned with or tagged with that is not who you really are in whole. And we all understand that.
And let's not forget, Becky, that Lisa Cook was involved with approving and supporting the raising of rates in the Biden administration to combat the inflation that we had up to 5 3/8 during, 14 months of the Biden administration. So the idea that she has shown some, political bias in her votes, I think is wrong.
Inflation gets to 9%. You finally decided they were way too late. So someone was saying that yesterday. I think somebody was saying, well, look, Biden let the Fed do what it needed. I mean, by the time they raised rates, you can't say that was, that they weren't. Prior to that, they could have been subject to political
Joe,
pressure.
I have a slightly different take on that.
I'm sure.
I have a different take on that, Joe. Which month? Tell me which month the Fed was. I think they were 3 to 6 months late. And whether or not that would have headed off the inflation, but some people say way late, like they were a year late or 2 years late.
I don't know.
If you think about the idea that when the inflation really showed itself, we were in the middle of a massive pandemic and the second round of it in December of 21. I'm not sure the Fed was supposed to be hiking interest rates into the second round of COVID. That's really my issue with that, of how late the Fed was. Does Powell think they should have raised earlier? Yeah, in hindsight, for sure, they should have. It would have been great and better if they had. But the amount that they were late, I'm not sure is as consequential to the inflation outcome as people have made it out to be.
Okay, it's a lot to think about. I appreciate you listening at the top of the show and playing along to continue the conversation. Steve, it's great to see you.
That is Squawk Pod for today. Thanks for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. And please follow Squawk Pod on your podcast platform of choice and get the best of our show right into your ears every day. And listen whenever you want. That's it. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.